Hi guys, this is Taylor and I'm here today with my 10 favorite reads of 2017. So right off the bat, I'm going to come out with a couple of disclaimers and say that A, almost none of these were 2017 releases, and B, I did pretty much take off the first half of the year from reading, so I read about half as much as I usually would. And as a result, my top 10 wasn't as strong to me personally as it has been in past years, simply because I was drawing from a smaller pool of books, if that makes any sense. But I did rank these, so we're going to start at number 10 and work our way up. So coming in at number 10, I have Colorless Sakura Tizaki and His Years of Pilgrimage by Haruki Murakami. Classic Taylor. This is Murakami's most recent full-length novel. It follows Sakura Tizaki as he reminisces about 4 close friends he had in high school who all abandoned him seemingly without reason after they all graduated. He is at a point in his life where he just wants to try and reconnect with these friends and figure out what happened, and this takes him on a journey that has some surprising destinations and conclusions. I will be upfront with you and tell you that this is kind of a passive read for me until the very last chapter. It might be that the final conclusions drawn at the end were just something that resonated or something that I needed to hear at the time. But yeah, that very last chapter had that classic Murakami effect where I just thought about it for days after I finally put this down. It's not even one of my favorite works by him, that's why it's at number 10. But it did pull a surprise punch on me, and I have to give it credit for that. At number 9, I have Turtles All the Way Down by John Green, and I think the person who is most surprised about this is me. I'm not going to talk at any length about this because it was everywhere last year, but for John Green to have written a novel that still appeals to me a decade after I first started reading him, that's commendable. I think that this book is a great piece of representation. I think it inspires empathy and a richer understanding of the world around us and the very different types of struggles that people face, and that all of those things in a novel marketed to young adults is more important now than ever. Coming in at number 8, I have The Head of the Saint by Socorro Osceola. So this is YA translated from Portuguese and written by a Brazilian author. It takes place in Brazil and follows our main character Samuel, who is newly orphaned and living inside the head of a decapitated statue. When he is inside the head of the saint, he can hear the thoughts and the prayers of the surrounding townspeople, and he quickly figures out how to use this to his advantage. Obviously, this incorporates elements of magical realism. I thought it was really well done. I also really admired the different tones that the author was able to achieve, from very mournful and somber to very light and playful, and the variation in tone as well as the plot, which I thought was really well paced and just very interesting and engaging, just really sold the reading experience to me. This just ended up ticking a lot of boxes for me, and I think it's one that a lot of people would really enjoy. At number 7, I have Vivian Apple Needs a Miracle by Katie Coyle. This is a sequel and the last of a duology, but I can really recommend both books equally. I've talked about this previously. This is a dystopian YA series that begins with both of Vivian's parents disappearing in an apparent religious rapture, and the rest of the world dissolving into absolute chaos after the rapture, as the world becomes incredibly unstable and unsafe for women, racial minorities, sexual minorities. Again, I think this is an incredibly timely series. I was choked up at the end because the built-up tension felt so incredibly raw and plausible. Basically, I would love more people to pick up the second book in this series. The first one was pretty popular, but not as many people continued on. It's only a 2-book series, and I think it's one really worth finishing, and I really enjoyed the way that it played out. Next at number 6, I have Sorry to Disrupt the Peace by Patty Yumi Cottrell. I randomly saw this at the library one day and decided to pick it up, and that was one of the best book-related calls I made this year. This is about a 30-something named Helen who receives news of her brother's suicide and immediately travels back to her hometown to see her parents and kind of play detective. I have a hard time summing up what the plot is about beyond that, because I think this is a book that could really be about different things depending on who the reader is. I would call it truly bizarre. I have a couple Goodreads updates where I'm just like, what is going on? But more than that, I feel like this book is kind of like an exercise in reader interpretation, if that makes any sense. This book made me set it aside and think for a prolonged period of time and that is where the value was to me. I don't think I could recommend this to absolutely everybody, but if my description sounded intriguing to you, then I would absolutely give it a shot and see what you make of it, with an advisory note that it does contain some pretty in-depth discussion of suicide. Coming in at number 5, I have Bel Canto by Ann Patchett. Forgive me, but Ann Patchett was an author that I associated with an older demographic for some reason, so I had limited expectations for how much I would actually like this book, but I was wrong. It was gorgeous. So this is about an attempted military coup at a CEO's birthday party in an unnamed country in South America. People from all around the world have come to this party and are then held captive inside this mansion, and everyone ends up forming communities and relationships despite language barriers, despite actively being held captive. Ann Patchett's characters and her writing style are both, like, the best. I don't typically do too well with novels that are paced this slowly, but every detail, every characterization was just so rich and wonderful. My hot take is that her tone and her writing style reminded me of a better Kazuo Ishiguro. Don't write off Ann Patchett was the lesson that this taught me. At number 4, I have Landscape with Invisible Hand by M.T. Anderson. I have been waiting an actual literal decade for M.T. Anderson to write another YA novel, and this did anything but disappoint. So this is a very short novel about a near dystopian future where the Earth has been inhabited by coffee table shaped aliens called the Vuv. The Vuv have a lot of advanced technology and they become the wealthiest upper class of citizens. It then becomes very difficult for humans to make a living and have access to basic rights such as housing and healthcare unless they have some connection to the aliens, which of course has parallels to real-life issues like income inequality. This is all done in M.T. Anderson's signature style, which is bleak and brutal and laugh-out-loud funny somehow all at the same time. This is a book that I made many of my coworkers at the library read. For a lot of them, it was their first M.T. Anderson, and now they're all reading his back catalog. It's great. And as an aside, I do have an extra copy of this book because I met M.T. Anderson at Boston Book Festival while I was dressed as a Boston area duck boat. It's a long story, but I was thinking of doing a giveaway for this copy. So let me know in the comments down below if you'd be interested in something like that, and I'll kind of gauge the interest level and figure out something from there. Okay, so the third best book that I read in 2017 was The Dumb House by John Burnside. Yes, I finally did it. This has enjoyed immense popularity here on BookTube, and I'm not sure what I can say about it that hasn't been said before, but this is a piece of literary fiction that chronicles the life of a man who becomes obsessed with the soul and the origins of speech. It is very deeply disturbing and twisted, and a lot of the enjoyment comes from going down the rabbit hole with him and seeing just how far he will take his own experiments and how far he'll go to satisfy his curiosities. The writing and the pacing is beautiful in almost a grotesque way. Like, the way that the plot behaves and moves is almost sickly and lurching in itself. I can imagine a more disturbing novel, but this was definitely on the upper limits of what I can handle, so definitely be aware of that. But regardless, I still routinely think about this book. It was very, very good. The second best book that I read in 2017 was The Disaster Artist by Greg Sestero and Tom Bissell. I pretty much just talked about this in my December wrap-up, so if you would like to hear about this in slightly more detail, you can go ahead and watch that. But really what got me about The Disaster Artist was just that it was so far from what I expected. I guess I expected a tell-all, wisecracking memoir about acting in this cult classic movie, and instead I got this surreal and moving story about friendship and trying to achieve seemingly impossible goals. So for me, I think a lot of my enjoyment of this book came from the fact that it subverted my expectations. So perhaps if you read this knowing more of what to expect, you might have a different reading experience. But regardless, this was a 5-star read to me. It was valuable and entertaining in so many different ways, and I think I did myself a disservice by waiting so long to pick this up, so maybe I learned a lesson there. So that leaves the single best book that I read in 2017, which was doubtlessly Surpassing Certainty by Janet Mock. Janet Mock is an incredible activist, author, TV anchor, probably other things that I don't even know about because she's so talented. And this is her second memoir that focuses specifically on her 20s. Her first memoir was called Redefining Realness, and I really, really liked it. It talks mostly about her experiences growing up as a transgender Black woman in Hawaii, really her definitive experiences as a child and teenager. But basically I felt like the topics that she covered in Surpassing Certainty were even more personal and vulnerable and sophisticated. She writes with no filter whatsoever about her relationships in her 20s and what they taught her, college, trying to navigate various jobs, and of course provides such a deeply important perspective on the multiracial trans experience. And for me, just the sense of upward gains and hope, especially in the last quarter of the book, ramping up towards the end, just left me on an emotional high for weeks, I feel like. So I loved this so much, and it was so important for me to read in my 20s, and almost everyone I talked to this year had no idea that she had written another memoir. So I kind of feel like it's my civic duty to inform everyone that she has written a second memoir, and in my opinion it's even better than her first. I would recommend reading Redefining Realness first because that one provides the foundation for her life that Surpassing Certainty then builds off of. But really, you can't really go wrong with either of them. So there you have it. That was the very best of what I read in 2017. Feel free to let me know the best of what you read last year, and I hope to see you very, very soon with some 2018 related content. Bye!